Start this from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And we're ready to go. I'm going to start here. First of all, Bob, what I was trying to say to you before, and I'll listen to your story. Don't worry about it. This thing all starts off with a rock, by the way. And I'm starting off with this image is inside the cover of my book initially. And I'm starting off with this. And first of all, I would like to say that I would like to thank all of you because I really feel this is an honor and privilege to be speaking to you tonight about my photo essay, A Walk with Sisyphus. And I can tell you there's a couple of people, Josh, for instance, he sort of joined me on this journey at the beginning when I said I wanted to be part of the certification program. I decided to do something on existential philosophy. And it really was generated by a course I had at the Photo Center that connected philosophers with photography. So Josh was at the beginning of this, the whole thing getting started. And as you may really all realize, King Sisyphus in Greek mythology is the gentleman that rolls that stone up the hill, only to see it roll all the way down and to have to start all over again. Some of what we're going to talk about is how we got to this point, for one. And number two, why this is a metaphor for existential philosophers such as the Nobel Prize winning author Albert Camus. And I start off with this because this rock is something, for me, represents a very immovable object. But as we look out, it's the ocean is sort of running up against it, and you look out to an image of a boat that is really sinking. And this becomes a little bit more important as we go along, because this picture was taken about 12 years ago. But I use it again in these images as we go along. As Laurie stated, for 50 years I was a photographer, a financial professional. But 60 years I was a photographer with my uncles, and I'm very, very proud of all the people that were in my life because they presented such great role models. And my uncles really started me with a camera on my confirmation, and my other uncle had all the darkroom equipment. And what happened actually, I entered into the accounting profession, and I left that, and I started my own business, and I was photographing a lot of dancers. And that was such a lot of it was just bread and butter. I mean, kids in dancing schools, but a lot of it really, I worked with a lot of professionals, and they really taught me tremendous elements of composition and design, mostly because as they're walking through their moves, they're really creating plenty of visual and design elements. I also studied, I had to leave that, it didn't work out. So I had to leave, got back into the financial profession. But in the meantime, I studied Ansel Adams' methodology of the zone system. And he helped me, I said he, like he's still alive, he helped me understand how I can represent things and interpret images in black and white. The other part of this that's extremely important is that as I went in college, I was required to take 24 credits in theology and philosophy. And I think one of the things is that what respected that, and believe me, it wasn't easy. I didn't go to classes half the time. I had to retake a class, but I got through it. And interestingly enough, some of what happened in those classes stayed with me more so than the accounting. So much to the extent that when the president of Seton University visited Philadelphia, and I was talking to one of the heads of departments, and I started telling this woman about how it stayed with me. She was like, she lit up like a Christmas tree. But mostly what has happened, or what I think about, is how do I take a complex issue and convey it in an understandable way? My hope tonight is that I did that to a certain level. I can tell you that as an artist, as a visual artist, I somewhat satisfied myself. Now, if I satisfied everybody that's out there, I think that's up for interpretation. Getting back to Albert Camus, I read his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, and I still have a copy of it. And I'm gonna actually, if you can see me, I still got this book. It's right here. It's free, right? It's all discolored. This thing is like 60 years old. And I can tell you that the tax code was easier to read. And, you know, the thing about him is that he was a Nobel Prize winning author. And his thesis is, and him and his contemporaries, which was Jean-Paul Sartre, who, like I channel through this as we talk about it, they talked about the individuals must accept life's absurdities. And obviously suicide was not a chance. So there's four tenets, as I could read through his book and try to understand this, that they held as important. One was death, which was basically the inevitable. It's the place where we're going. No matter what we do, we're winding up there. So you take that into context and you're facing the world and you understand that the world has absurdities. Well, one of the biggest issues that they took on about what the absurd was man's indifference to man. And I think we have all probably, I think going through this coronavirus and people dying, and there's really so much indifference, it does sort of illustrate that. We run through the idea of despair, and we wind up despairing, but we have to really think about, you know, what do we do? And to them, suicide was not an option. What they did really express, or what they tried to convey, is that their hope is just deeper than ordinary hope. And as Sartre expressed, we are condemned to be free. So while we do face the inevitable and we're condemned to the inevitable, we are condemned to be free in their understanding. So it was important for them to really express live your life fully, very authentically. So as I go through my photo essay, my challenge was to try to put that in a way that the reader might be able to interpret. And I have to say, I have to thank Gregory Eddie Jones, who was my mentor, because as we were going through this, he suggested to me that somehow I should put quotes to my images. So I went back through the myth of Sisyphus again, and I looked at my images and I assigned his quotes to it. And like I said before, reading that book was harder than reading the tax code. So it's sort of in there. I'm not sure that the context can be grabbed that readily because of maybe the way he phrased it or whatever, but it's basically his words. So as I go along and I talk about this, I'm going to essentially be talking about how I see it and try to interpret it. So we're going to begin with that. This right here this to me is who Camus wrote about. This is the man that it's all about. And as I said, to me, this is an image of Sisyphus. And forget the loincloth, all right? This is what Sisyphus looked like to me, growing up in North New Jersey. And it was a streetwise existence, and these pictures, this image really exhibits a life, essentially 1967 to 1968, which basically bracketed the riots in Newark in the summer of '67 through the death of my father in the winter of '68. And if you look at this background that's there is superimposed from actual photographs of the riot. If you look on the left, there are the troops and those people that they have up against the wall, the African Americans in the city, supposedly burning it down, but that's left to like interpretation because it may have been as much a police riot as it may have been a social riot. And on the right these are actual troops going through the streets of the city, and I would see them on a daily basis right through my street. And they had 50 caliber machine guns in the back of their Jeeps, and they were all my age. They were kids I went to high school with. I happened to get into college, so I was not being drafted at that time, but they avoided the draft by joining the National Guard. At night, you could hear the machine guns firing at night. And then when I pulled this picture together, in the middle of it is we have my man there. And the saying under there, hey, Hades, show me how those handcuffs work. And death took a holiday. So we have to talk about Sisyphus a little bit. Sisyphus was basically a charlatan. I kind of try to explain and put into context that he had no qualms about selling you a used chariot without the spokes, and then if you went to collect the money and get it back from him, he disappeared. He did a number of things, like he angered the gods because he would talk about them. He would spread rumors about them. But this is the height of his accomplishment, next to rolling the stone up the hill, was that they sent Hades down to really, to get him and take him to the kingdom of the dead, to take him to the underworld. So Hades shows up. He says, hey, Sisyphus, we got to go down to Hades. And here, look, I got these handcuffs with you. It's kind of novel idea, you know, but I got to put these on you and take you down to me. So Sisyphus turns to Hades and says, show me how they work. So being the con man that he is, and you can tell by looking at this man, he's ready to sell him a used car. Hades tries them on. Next thing you know, Sisyphus throws him in the closet, locks the door, goes out about his merry way. Well, in the myth, death took a holiday. For instance, if you and I met on the battlefield and you cut off my head, the next day you and I could be sitting down at dinner talking sports. You know, the whole world was up in arms about what was going on. And then finally, Hades got out of his dilemma, found Sisyphus and brought him down to the underworld to eternally roll that stone up and down the hill. So this gentleman, this ne'er-do-well, has become a metaphor for Albert Camus. Now, the interesting thing about this, and as we go to the next slide, the inevitable is what Camus and the existentialists were talking all about. And here is Sisyphus. He figured out a way to get away without the inevitable, without dying. But here, as we get into the inevitable and juxtaposing the image that I have next to it, what these photographers shooting conceivably outside of their frame, there's a terrible interest in what they're looking at. And to me, when I looked at this and I ran this cemetery right next to it, I'm saying, what could be so intense is that's where we're all going. And for Camus, and as he expresses in here, it come at last to the attitude we have towards death. And we look at the image next to it, and people can barely speak of it. They're sort of in an understanding of we deny what it is. It doesn't seem relevant to them at this particular time. They go about their business and they lack, there's a separation of the idea from that to what they really think that they are. At least for me, these are what these images, why I sort of connected these with those thoughts that they had. Does this look familiar to anyone? Well, what Camus once said was that absurdity can hit you in the face on any street corner. Lo and behold, I'm walking down South Philadelphia, and wait a minute, stop. No, wait a minute. No stop, anytime. Wait a minute, do not enter. And all of this is on Christian Street. I think it speaks to the absurdity at some point of rules and how many there are and how many we have to face. Life in a revolving door, round and round and round. Many people just, are in that dilemma and just going around and around and around, and it creates anxiety and it's absurd. And if we pause to think about it, is there really anywhere to go? And a bit of this image to me is, I'm leaning a little bit on Jean-Paul Sartre and There's No Exit, his play about three people in purgatory. And this other image where I look at it avoiding pathos or the indifference, but it speaks to a couple of points here. For instance, Jean-Paul Sartre, he wrote No Exit was about three people in purgatory, two of them female and one male, and a love triangle. Also, I think about this a little bit about Plato and the cave, where there were three people in a cave and knew nothing of the outside world. And one went out and saw what was going on and went back and reported all the things that were going on in the world. And he was met with disbelief. So for me, this exhibits the idea of indifference, lacking empathy, and not even trying. We always want a path to the truth. We want to be able to distinguish the truth and know what is, true and what is false. And it's not that easy. And this reflection really sort of exhibits that for me. Because essentially we can look right in here, trying to find the truth and a way in. Okay, but do we have, what would be thinking about turning around and really seeing where the truth is? Do we stop at this? Do we lose our, the pathos in going there? So this is sort of what Camus was saying and how I interpreted with his image. And for him, the stranger in the mirror, the absurd is really us. It's us looking in there and not maybe seeing ourselves, but in context of trying to find an identity, not seeing it in the mirror, not seeing in ourselves at this point. And we're on the road to trying to search for the truth and find our way through the absurd. But in many cases, the window we're looking through, this is the best that is offered to us. It's not that easy to get through it. This is what the world puts in our way. So obvious and yet so hard to win. And seemingly the lucid effort just sort of dries up. And then saintly passions don't help. And for Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre, they kind of only created an idea or created nostalgia, which was always looking, not necessarily looking forward. And to me, some of this harkens to the religious aspect of it that doesn't necessarily, in their mind, help us because they were basically atheistic. Despair, hopelessness, life suspended. A total absence of hope. Once again, I bring the trio in. They're kind of working together or not working together. And I registered this particular quote from Camus, in a sense, they're eluding hope and they're confused and they're misled. Like I said, these, for me, were linking itself up to into Sartre, connecting sort of him with Camus, with his with his play on no exit. And here, this starts beginning the idea of really getting through all of the absurdity and what we have to do about it. And I say this, that yes, John Paul, there is an exit. And once again, I'm taking in the concept of life struggles, the concept of the absurd, the concept of the path we have to go through, the hills we have to climb to get through a lot of life struggles. And we've all been there, we've all accomplished it. And there are exits. They're not necessarily that easy to find. In this particular image, there's two exits. And if you look, one is lower and one is higher. You have to really work your way through the reflections and possibly through the clouds and into the building, and before you might be able to get there. So, but what Jean Paul Sartre says, that we are nothing but the sum of our actions, responsible for ourselves to be free, and committing ourselves to be free, condemned to be free. Through the exit, there is life, like the rose petal. And actually, the quote there is from Camus, and he takes this up, that once you get through it, there is a life, there is another side to this that you have to work through. It's desire, you know, it's nature, it's the life before us. We come now back to Sisyphus, right? He was rebellious, and what I liked about him, even though, I mean, he was a bit of a con man, he was defiant. I think we all have to be defiant. And for Camus, basically Sisyphus yet was powerless. He was rebellious. He was aware of his condition, but the moment he got that stone up to the hill and it rolled back down, there was a lucidity that came over him. And his basic torture crowned his victory. Because I guess in Camus' words, he identified with it. And what Camus said was that there is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn. And I chose this image of this little girl with her water pistol. This was taken in front of the Vatican, shooting at a shadow. This young lady was not to be denied. She was scorning her faith. Okay, that's a shadow, I don't care. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but she was somewhat defiant in my mind, somewhat defiant. This, I'm going to go back to this a little bit, and if you were able to go to my webpage, you could see some of the dancers on it. So this particular image dances to me. This is a shape you might see a dancer form as they're going through their movement. But it says to me that trying to find your identity is not easy. You can bend, but you can't break. This is a piece of driftwood that was sitting on the beach, and I'm sure it was there for a very long time, not being moved, making its presence known. Simply stated, in the world of the existentialists and Camus and Sartre, this was the statement they were trying to make to us. Again, on the other side, and these are the same three people that I assigned to no exit, who are now ascending. They're moving beyond, somehow or another, they found their identity in this particular image for me. They're ascending through that. There is hope. They can work through, they saw the roses, they understand the difficulties in life now. They've assigned the idea that they can go through and really find out who they are and to be authentic. Ultimately, for Camus, and if there was anything that we should be concerned ourselves with, is hoping for another life when the one that we have here in front of us is really an impeccable grandeur. Now, this image of that rock that was at the very beginning, this is the same rock. That ship that's over in there sinking has sunk a little bit further, but now we're looking, to me, this is looking at and trying to understand the life of impeccable grandeur in a young man as the sun sort of sets through him. So there was a way of me looking at hope and staying in the moment and doing the best that we can and working through it. Now, for me, I'm happiest when I'm on the beach, under the shade of an umbrella, with the water, you know, rushing up against the shore, and I can hear it, and not a care in the world. And what this resides for Camus and his myth of Sisyphus is that when we understand that he has scorned his fate, he became lucid in understanding that he can roll this stone up the hill and be perhaps the greatest stone roller that the world has ever known. We must imagine him as happy. And as you read through these acknowledgements, there's a bit of a anecdote I'd like to add to this that is not an image. I've become a follower of a show on Netflix called The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And while there's a lot to love about that show, one of the subplot channels Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce is the controversial comedian from the 50s and 60s. I mean, he was always getting arrested for saying things that today, that were censored back then, today we would consider normal. But Mrs. Maisel, a comedian in her own right, going through some trials and tribulations of her own, is walking down a Manhattan street later at night, and she looks into a bar, and she sees Lenny sitting at the bar. You have to know there's a bit of a history with her and Lenny, at least in the context of the show, in that she has bailed him out of jail a time or two. So she walks into the bar and sits next to him, and he turns around and he notices her, and he looks at her. And she looks at him, and he looks very despairing. He looks upset. And she said to him, "What's wrong?" And he turns to her and says sadly that he has learned that there is a warrant out for his arrest in Chicago. He then turns, looks at his glass a bit, looks down a little bit. And then he talks to her and he says, "You know, I get this thing about the hair and the loincloth, but this rolling the stone up the hill, back up the hill, it's really hard." So Mrs. Maisel looks at him in a moment. She says, "You know, you ought to try that in heels." So it is about being authentic. And I want to make reference and give some credit to Ellen Rosenberg, because her work that she did back on one of the other presentations really talked about life and people who are trying to work very hard, living their life authentically. So I'd like to also acknowledge a couple of people that are here. I mean, everybody at the the Art Center. It's been a wonderful thing just working with them. They've all been very supportive. Some of the images that are in here are from Angels and Saints, Eros and all, a film, Life Dreams Films company. Pete Diglio he's actually Sisyphus. Teresa was kind enough to model for me. David is the 40s kid. He's the guy walking through the elevator. My wife, of course, and the Philip Mills photo exhibit, because they actually took one of the photos I showed you, and I got an award for it. The people at the Art Center, and Gregory A.D. Jones, thank you so much for all the help. And finally, one of the things that my books are available if you went to my website. You can order them via Blurb, but I have 10 copies here that if anybody is interested, if they're $35 each, but I would like you to really donate to the Art Center. And if you can do that and they give me your name and address, I'll put them in the mail to you. So that's all that I have right now, folks.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, everybody. Everybody can unmute themselves and we can give them a round of applause. Congratulations.
Great job, Dad.
Great, Dan.
That was great. And
great job, Dad.
Does anybody have any questions? I mean, did we all get it? Now we all understand it. We all have Camus like in our pockets, right?
How do we get it so we can see everybody? Can we see Dan?
Oh, unshare. Can you unshare, my dear?
Okay.
I'm gonna put some more.
Donate.
Okay, so hi, Daniel. It's great to finally see it all in place, because I too was there from the beginning when Daniel took that class and he sat 2 rows behind me. And I have to tell you, the rest of us are like Buddhism in what our attitude. And here he comes with this book. And do you remember this? We were arguing with you because he and I both like to talk a lot. So, but he was talking and we had no idea what he was talking about. And it was totally alien to anything that I understood, because it was so depressing. It was like, no, I'm a Buddhist. Life is a journey. And he's like, well, yeah, but you roll the rock up and it comes back. And it was just, so it is for me, the ability.
Hey, Dana, what's up?
Yeah. The
It's my
ability
father.
for you to
My daughter.
put this together. She's lived with it. You to take this.
But I remember
that was so
Ellen.
grand, and then bring it into this small, beautiful book.
Oh,
So
thank
I
you.
honor you.
Thanks.
Because now I get it.
The thing is, I remember in that class, you started yelling at me, "You are Sisyphus."
Yes, I did. I said that. I wasn't yelling. I just said, "You're Sisyphus." Like,
Yeah.
Don't do this. It took me years to get to me. But I do honor you, because I don't know how you walked it into, considering all of the classes that we've gone through, and you rolled to this perfect ability down to even only 30 minutes of a conversation, so that we all get it and see the pictures with it. And that really is a major feat.
Yeah, that helps to understand.
You really get it? Oh, God.
Yeah, no, I do. I think it's really just, I want to see it again, because I did watch it from the beginning. And I had
Gonna be, they're making a YouTube version that I can
they
upload
will.
to my website.
Yeah.
But, I got to thank my wife for that, because she keeps pounding me. I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
I don't know where he was going. I knew that he read this book in college. I could tell you, but then he was reading it again, and I'm just really impressed. I am duly impressed. I really am. I am.
Coming from you, I take that compliment very highly.
Because I don't give them very much. Is that why?
No. You're very open in what you say. That's for certain.
Yeah, so
I know that. And I kind of miss hanging out with you.
Yeah, well, I'm around. You're very close to me. We can wear our masks.
I know you're around the corner.
There's a question in the chat. I don't know, John, if you want to ask it yourself, but I can ask it for you.
Yes, I can do it myself.
Great.
Trying to answer the question. I really enjoyed the presentation. And I wonder how you went about this. Did you assemble pictures that you took previously? Once you had the idea, did you go out in the world and take these images, or combination of both? Once you had the idea, how did you put the photos together to bring it to life?
You know, like everything else, if I were to really help someone that's trying to get this, you have to somehow begin with the idea. And once you have the idea, you go from there. And I would be walking down the street, and I've taken hundreds of photographs, and many of these things are me just walking down the street. And when I saw something, I took it. I said, how does that fit in? And like I said before, my background, I did a lot with a 4x5 camera in the darkroom. But one of the benefits of using Photoshop, and that was one of the reasons I did this. When I took this I took this idea. I said, in order for me to do it, if I can connect the dots, I have to make people visually interested in it and really explore all the techniques that I have to learn, because I have to learn to do this. So every time I had my camera in my hand, I would take the picture and I would try to fit it in. What I showed you here is not all the pictures. The book itself has 30 or so more pictures in it with a bit more quotes, but it was everything I could do, everything I could muster from every corner and everything to try to put it together. But the idea was implanted in my head. And I will say this idea of how we struggle through life, and as I pointed out in that thing with Lenny Bruce and Mrs. Maisel, we face this every day. It's part of our struggle. We all look for our identity. And if we're going to try to find our identity, we have to struggle with it and make sure we keep going at it. So this is an ongoing project for me.
So all new photographs you sought out, you took, and you selected after you came up with the notion, the idea for the project, not old work drawn forward.
They were as happened as I was doing them, like the one where going through the revolving door. I had it in my mind to do that. There was a quote. It was a simple thing. Life is absurd. Like life, going through a revolving door is absurd. That fella that's in there, we worked together on a little project. We went down to 30th Street Station. I saw the revolving door. Said, go over there, David. We got to do this. The same thing walking down South Philadelphia. I saw all those things in one spot. I said, this is the absurd. And the other thing, I as a CPA, I worked with a set of rules. It stinks. Now you can't really go by the rules.
So some were found images, and some you staged.
I staged, and I found, and some of the ones that I found were older images that I had.
So a mix of old images and ones you sought out and found or you staged for the project.
Yeah, and the one thing that I would say about this is I kept that book for 50 years. So this has been with me for 50 years. So it's never left me, and it's never going to leave me.
Great. Anybody else have questions or comments?
I have a question. So do you think that is the project at this level completed? I know we always continue with a certain aspect of what it is. Have you thought about how you're going to expand on it now? Your next mess?
Well, you know what? I went through and I read a couple of things by Camus. I mean, one of the things that I read, I read this a long time ago, and I wanted to do something with it, and I'm reading it again, is The Plague. As everybody's familiar with, The Plague is about the city of Iran that sits on the Mediterranean, Algeria, when the plague hits. And it takes into account there's a doctor that's the centerpiece of this, and he's trying to maintain the idea of taking care of people while he's trying to nurture the bureaucracy to try to handle it. And he's getting confronted from all different angles with all these people. And he's sort of the center of this thing that is dealing with all this absurdity around it. I mean, some of the images that really stick out in my mind is that they had these carloads of bodies that would go into the incinerators. You know, at night there was nobody on the street. That's sort of, all of a sudden we were living that, you know. I think it's taking that idea of that central person, what the idea of trying to find this identity is always something you can work with. And it was done, Lenny Bruce was doing it, you know. Lenny Bruce was finding his identity. He was struggling with it, you know. That's what I took away from that that show, that sitcom.
Hey, Dan, this is Carl Finkbeiner.
Hey, Carl,
How you doing?
you grew your hair.
Well, my hair grew itself.
I can't
Yeah,
grow
I
mine.
was going to say, Carl, look at it. Nice.
I call it COVID hair. Dan, when I first met you, you were talking about The Zone System by Ansel Adams.
Right.
And you talked about it again tonight as having been something of an influence, right? Can you explain how it is that Ansel Adams' zone system relates to the images that you were creating here? I mean, were you using it to try to create certain moods, atmospheres, or whatever? Because your images are not, I mean, if I looked at Ansel Adams' images and I looked at your images, I wouldn't say that they were highly similar.
No, they're not. And there's a couple of reasons. If you look at the pictures behind me, they're all printed in the darkroom using a system. They're more reminiscent of it.
Mhm.
The other part of it is that most of this was done digitally, and my learning curve in converting was a little bit different than in using the darkroom. What I would say about my experience with trying to understand the zone system and the work that I did is that my perspective is black and white. When I see things and I want to present an image, I see it in black and white. Now, I have learned a couple of things, and through process, I'm working inside Lightroom and Photoshop to sort of mimic that, what Adams did. And I've gotten closer, but most of it is more that I see things more in my photographs in black and white. And I think it resides mostly in my darkroom experience and trying to work with his methodology of doing it. And the converse of that is that I'm not as confident doing things in color. So I don't know.
I think this was terrific, Dan.
Thank you.
Really glad you shared it with us. I was happy to be here tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm always glad to see your stuff and really you do a good job. Sometimes I hate you. You're so good. No, he does a really good job, and you know it's really I think it's a really benefit. We're talking to the people that are in the classes with me, that they're all here, and what their mindset is about, you know, working, you know, as artists in the photographic community.
So Dan, I'll ask you, this is Stephen.
Hey, Steve, what's up?
I don't know, Upper Volta. So now that you've finished a project like this, how do you get inspired to find the next project that you're going to do? It's different for everyone, but I'm asking, you know, for yourself.
Well, you know, this has been one of the things that is important to know, that I was supposed to do this back in April, and COVID really threw that out the door. I was planning to go to Italy, and that got postponed at least. But my intention was to really, I have a couple of projects in mind, and one of the things I was trying to do, and I'm trying to regroup now, I was going to go to Italy, back to where my family was, and try to take the idea that I had, you know, and what I understand from maybe a philosophical, creative point of view, and learn about where my grandparents came from. Just sort of traveling through that. But that project obviously is on hold. I'm trying to work a couple of things. I did some, I've been working with Gregory Eddie Jones, and he was critiquing one of the class we had. I was doing some things on COVID or in my neighborhood around Chestnut Hill when it was despairing, you know, those, I tried to work some angles with that, but I haven't come up with a definite project yet. Well, one of the things, you know, I'm running around with a lot of different things in my head right now, you know. I'll figure on something and I'll get it done, whether it's just something on the street or something somewhere. I'll figure out something, but I don't have any real, those are the things that I wanted to do, but they haven't really come to pass.
You're not alone in that.
I know.
I think there's a lot of people that are like that, because the things that they would normally shoot, like you were supposed to go to Italy, changed, and probably had been thinking about it for years. So you have to sort of turn the brain around
Right.
to redo it.
Right, right. We have to find new ideas, but they're out there somewhere.
Or inside. You know, I was just emailing today with Brent Reaney. You remember Brent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brent is in Houston now in an MFA program, doing interesting stuff as you would expect. But one of the things, the comment he made was the pandemic forced him to turn inside and to examine himself and what he wanted to do with this more closely, and he felt he got a lot out of it. I mean, that's another source. It's not just external, is all I'm saying.
Well, one of the things is I'm continuing to read. So if you read, if you get an idea, reading, and let's take an essay or something, maybe that's something that you go in there and you look at and you find what they're trying to say and you conjure the images and then bring it together using their idea. Similar, that would be a way of me moving from one project to another, as finding something that's sort of connected by someone's already having told the story, that I can try to advance it with images.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a way. Because I think really what we have to do as artists and photographers, we have to tell a story. That was one of the things I tried to do at the outset with this, is really have a story to talk about. And I think I got to that a bit, you know. There's a story for me in that.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Gregory says to keep shooting, which is exactly what you have to do.
I know. I know.
You know, that's it, just shoot.
No, there's a lot of things that I have in my library now that I've been shooting wherever I've gone. And that rock that's there, that rock that's at the beginning is there at the end. And I was there a couple of weeks ago doing it all over again. You know, that's Sunset Beach at Cape May. I've been there a number of times shooting it at different times of day, and it's always an interesting place to be.
Yeah. Any further questions? This is great.
It was great. And for those that don't know, Carl and Daniel and I and the other guy, Brent, who's on his MS, we were all in the program together. And that's what I'm going to kudos to the program, because none of us would have ever connected and met and been able to be as creative as Daniel has done with this without the program. It's amazing.
Like I said before, I started in photography a long time ago. And being brought up in the New York area, there was a sanctuary that I went to for learning and found people like we found here. It was called the New School. The New School, you know, is expanded. It's a big enterprise right now, a university. Mm-hmm. But what I found here at the Arts Center, and my hat's off to Sarah and all the other people around us, is that she has brought together a community like us that are looking to expand what we do creatively in the media that we chose. So my hat's off to them.
Thank you. And I also want to thank you so much for offering to donate. Well, if people want to borrow your book, they should donate to PPAC. I don't know if people caught that, but he's got 10 copies. And I really appreciate that offer. I can put it back in the chat. Just let us know how to facilitate that.
Well, they write the check out to you. You take their name and address and give it to me, and I'll put it in the mail.
Great. So you heard it. You heard it, folks. Email me.
Otherwise, you go onto my website to Blurb, and you can buy it there.
Yeah, but thank you.
Not that I don't care about being a shameless self-promoter, but.
Yeah. Go back to that last slide. No, I put in the information about your prints too. I'm sure that they're beautiful, beautiful prints. There was the one with the exit, the 2 signs with the exit, that I just thinking, oh my gosh, that would be such a beautiful print.
Is the one where you come up against is it the door?
No, the 2 windows, the exit on the floor. I love that. I love that piece. And I think it would be a beautiful print. So check in the chat for information about his prints. If you want to buy a book and donate to PPAC at the same time, we can help you with that too.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right, everybody. Well, congratulations again. And it was really a great evening. Thank you. You're awesome.
It was wonderful.
Thank you all. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here and talk about it. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Great job, man.
Don't be a stranger now that you've finished, dude.
No, I'm not. I'm going to come down. I got to print some stuff.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right.
Great.
All right. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.
Bye.